public hearing in Calgary. First of all, I'd like to introduce the Commission. My name is Justice Dallas Miller. I'm the Chairman of the Commission, and I also serve as a Justice of the Court of King's Bench. By the way, you can see our full profiles on the EBC website, abebc.ca. To my left is Susan Sampson, a longtime resident of Sylvan Lake and an experienced municipal politician who has served a four-year term as mayor of Sylvan Lake. Her volunteer activity has been recognized by the community by way of receiving the Citizen of the Year Award and the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Award for volunteer service. To her left is Mr. John Evans, KC, a lawyer with a province-wide firm known as Stringham, and he works out of their Lethbridge office, and John conducts trials across the province. His legal ability has been recognized by way of receiving the King's Counsel, or KC designation, and John also volunteers as a member of the Alberta Judicial Nominating Committee. To my right is Dr. Julian Martin, a retired history professor from the University of Alberta with advanced degrees from Cambridge University. Julian has volunteered on many committees throughout the years in Edmonton and in Sherwood Park, and serves on the Provincial Surface Rights Board and Land Compensation Board. The far end of the table is Mr. Greg Clark from Calgary. Greg's an entrepreneur and consultant focusing on information and knowledge management. Greg brings to this commission a real advantage in that he served as the member of the Legislative Assembly representing Calgary Elbow a few years ago. Greg also serves as the chair of the Balancing Pool of Alberta and consults widely with organizations relative to proper governance. We are your Electoral Boundaries Commission, and we are here. This is our third session in Calgary, meeting all morning, full morning this morning, all afternoon, and this evening, and we'll be here. We're going to be in another location tomorrow in Calgary. This is our third week of touring the province. We started in Pinch Creek and Lethbridge, week one, and then last week we were in Edmonton and some northern smaller communities around Edmonton. We were in Drumheller on Monday. Next week we see the far north, Fort McMurray and Grand Prairie and other locations. So we had the privilege of seeing a good chunk of the province, and we have learned so much every session about the community that people represent or live in, and lots of suggestions and ideas. We are, as an Electoral Boundaries Commission, an independent body that has been appointed by the Speaker of the Legislature on behalf of the Legislative Assembly. And our task is to come up with a set of boundaries for the province, and two huge factors will determine our work. Number one, the legislature has expanded the Legislative Assembly from 87 seats to 89, so we have to incorporate 2 new seats. And the legislation that we work under tells us we have to take into consideration the population gains. As you're aware, Alberta has experienced a huge population growth, and so that's a factor that we must consider. It's of assistance to, I think, to give people an idea of what our timeline is like as a commission. We are under very strict timelines. We were appointed in late March by the Speaker, and in April we met as a commission a couple of times, and we started our deliberations in late May and will go to the end of June. Based on the information we receive in the public hearings and on the population data that we'll be studying and the written submissions that we receive, we will come up with an interim report. That interim report will be filed with the Speaker of the Legislature by late October. That will then become a public document, and individual Albertans will be able to respond to that, and we'll have another round of public hearings throughout December, January, and February. Then in late March, we're obligated to come up with a final report that we will file with the Speaker of the Legislative Assembly, and then the government and the opposition will deal with our report and enact enabling legislation based on what we say. As you know, each electoral division or riding or constituency has one member of the legislature that is elected by the individual, voters in that constituency. I'm pretty good at my presentation, but when the PowerPoint doesn't work, I can't remember where the next line is. We operate under the guidelines of the legislation that tells us several things which we must consider. And our ultimate goal, of course, is effective representation, to come up with a map and boundaries that ensure effective representation for all Albertans. Okay, we got it. No, yeah. So population, for comparative purposes, if we go back to the last Electoral Boundary Commission in 2017, they based their report on a population of just slightly over 4 million people. That was in 2017. Right now, we're dealing with a population of 4.88 million people across the province. And to give you some comparative perspective, the 2017 commission had a formula that looked like this, that came across, that determined the mean average of people in each electoral division and the target population to keep it safe as a riding of -25 to +25. So in other words, total population divided by 87 constituency reveals the mean average of 46,697. The target then is -25 of that figure or +25. That was 2017. This time around, for the population that we are dealing with of 4.8 million divided by 89 ridings, the mean average is 54,929, and you can see the range of -25 being just over 41,000 and +25 almost 69,000. Challenge is that the population growth has not been consistent and evenly divided or spread across the province. So we have to come up with electoral divisions that take into account that population growth in the two largest centers and that yield effective representation. Effective representation is the standard under Canadian electoral law, not one person, one vote. How do we come up with effective representation? We can consider several factors from the legislation. One of them is the sparsity, relative sparsity and density of population. The next is common community interests and organizations. Next is geographic features, more applicable, I think, to areas outside of Calgary and Edmonton, but also applicable within the city. Communication and transportation lines across the province. When we consider all those factors from the legislation, our task is to then come up with what is described as understandable and clear electoral boundaries. That's our challenge, and that's where we look forward to hearing from folks like you at our public hearing. Finally, we want to hear from you, and what I'm showing you right now is a current electoral map of Alberta, considering 87 electoral districts. After we're finished our project, it'll be slightly different, showing 89 electoral divisions. So, based on that introduction, and we're happy to provide any clarification questions if you have any as you present, but I'm happy to call up Jane Martin to be our first presenter. Yes, you have a seat right there.
So I thought then I'll find out what they do. Can I pick this up?
No, you can just talk right into it.
Oh, and one other thing, everything that goes on in the public hearing is recorded and will be available in audio form on our website in a matter of a day or two. And it's also transcribed and by the good people that operate Hansard, and the written transcript will be on the website as well.
Thanks very much. Good evening, I'm Jane Martin. The riding I currently live in is Calgary-Glenmore. where I have resided for the past 5 years. Although I was born in Calgary, after 2 years, we moved to Jumping Pound, and I lived there for 5 years. For grades 1 and 2, I attended the Springbank Community Hall because there was no elementary school. This is now where Callaway Park is located. Then we moved to Pincher Creek for 2 years. The summer before I started grade 5, we moved back to Calgary, and I still remember it being a huge adjustment moving to the big city from a small town and sticking out like a sore thumb. I recall overhearing my mom telling my dad that she was worried about me because I spoke like a country hick. At the time, I wasn't sure what she was talking about, but I did find that I had a difficult time fitting in and that I had less in common with my new city peers. From my personal experience, life definitely differs from rural, small town, and city ridings. I had different needs when I lived in Jumping Pound versus Pincher Creek and then Calgary. MLAs need to be able to represent their riding to the best of their ability. It would not be fair to the MLA or to the constituents to stretch a municipal riding beyond its municipal boundaries. I would encourage drawing up a fair map that keeps cities together. Calgary-Glenmore is the perfect example of a riding sharing geographic commonality bordered by the Glenmore Reservoir, Glenmore Park, and Fish Creek Provincial Park. I think it is important to keep provincial boundaries aligned with municipal boundaries. This is critical to ensure ridings do not lump disparate communities together. I recommend adding a seat to North Calgary and to South Edmonton to reflect current and future population growth. There is a substantial Jewish population residing in Calgary-Glenmore, which is home to 3 synagogues, a Jewish seniors residence, Jewish Recreation Center, Jewish Learning Institute, Calgary Jewish Federation, and Calgary Jewish Academy. Many seniors also reside in Calgary-Glenmore with access to 3 nursing homes, 2 long-term care facilities, 2 medical centers, a hospice, and a hospital. The demographics are changing with more families now residing in Calgary-Glenmore. Located within Calgary-Glenmore are 15 public schools, including a junior high for gifted children and William Roper Hull School for students with behavioral, emotional, social, and mental health challenges. There are also 3 separate schools and 2 charter schools, including a girls-only school. Calgary-Glenmore also has 4 child care centers and an orphanage. There are numerous playgrounds and green spaces, soccer fields, baseball diamonds, rinks, basketball courts, a skateboard park, an athletic park and sports field, and the Southland Leisure Center. For the most part, regardless of their age, our constituents tend to be more active and have chosen to live in Calgary-Glenmore due to its close proximity to the Glenmore Reservoir, Glenmore Park, and Fish Creek Provincial Park, where they can take part in water sports and have access to an extensive pathway system where they can walk, jog, or cycle. In addition, Calgary-Glenmore has 2 golf courses, tennis and pickleball courts, a racket club, and off-leash dog parks. As part of the Boundary Commission, I respect that you have an important role to play in our democratic process to not manipulate the boundaries, to keep our communities intact, and prevent gerrymandering through a fair and democratic process. I thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. Evans, any comments or questions?
No gerrymandering, right?
No. Okay.
Thank you for coming out tonight. And you should know that we've had a lot of people from Foothills, Glenmore come out this afternoon, this morning, and they are passionate about that community.
Because I called them all and got them to come out.
You weren't supposed to say that. But anyways, it's really refreshing to...
Because when I was the only one here, I thought, uh-oh.
No, you're well represented, and I've asked the questions, so don't read into that. We've asked a ton of questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Dr. Martin?
Well, yes, thank you. And yes, we have asked a ton of questions about Glenmore. And I'm just thinking, when do I get to move here? But it seems pretty full up. You're a little low, but not much. And do you experience infill?
No, we haven't really as of yet. Yeah, we're not quite inner city yet. You're talking about like infills as far as buildings?
That's right. And, basement suites and that sort of thing.
Not as much, no. I think we're more an established neighborhood, so we're not seeing that as much in our areas. It hasn't quite reached us yet.
So you're not experiencing the growth that seems to characterize much of Calgary.
Exactly.
Interesting. And you mentioned Jewish communities and Jewish
Yes.
infrastructure. Is that in this district as
Yes,
well?
it is.
Yes. Thank you very much.
You're so welcome.
So thank you. Yeah, thank you very much for being here. And we have heard a fair bit about Calgary Glenmore, and I guess I'll ask if there were neighborhoods in Glenmore that, like, if we needed to make some changes, even just little tweaks one way or the other. What's important to keep together? Where do you feel like it would be natural if we were to add a little bit from the edges of Glenmore into Glenmore? If we had.
Certainly, North Glenmore Park, I believe part of it is in Calgary Glenmore, and the other part is in, I think, maybe Year Old Riding, perhaps, Calgary Elbow. Is that correct?
You know what? There's that cutout at the very top there, strangely enough. So that has been, North Glenmore Park is actually altogether in Elbow, but it's south of, that one top little part is south of Glenmore Trail. So technically, the Community Association of North Glenmore Park is all together in Calgary Elbow.
Okay.
But that one little odd bit is south of Glenmore Trail and sort of feels a little bit like it's more Lake.
Okay, and then my old neighborhood was Kingsland, so I could see Kingsland because it's across the street from Chinook Park in Kelvin Grove, so I could see that if you were adding a neighborhood to add. I think Kingsland was part of Calgary Glenmore at one time.
And that would be where, in the top right-hand corner there, Glenmore Trail Elbow Drive, just punching Elbow Drive, that boundary out east a bit.
Yes.
To McLeod Trail, that Kingsland. Okay, that's helpful. Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
We have some time. Sorry, I'm going to exercise my right to ask a question.
Certainly.
You expressed some, being from Glenmore, you expressed some concern at the beginning about mixing small towns and cities. You're one of the last ridings that would ever be. It's almost impossible to do that.
Well, there's Tutina, right? So possibly.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Okay, so that's what your concern was.
That could, possibly be. Yeah, and I'm not sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was thinking south.
No, that's right. That would be right, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Well, thank you very much.
You're so welcome.
You're excused, and please stay for the rest of the
Thank
deliberations
you.
if you
Appreciate
can.
that. Thank you.
Jarrett? Yeah, we don't mark people late, and you get no bonuses for being early.
So I will apologize in advance. This is the first time I've spoken at a meeting of this sort, and I'm not nearly as well prepared or as well researched as Jane was. So
Okay.
I will probably take less time. Yeah, so my name is Jarrett Hargreaves, and I'm a resident of Calgary Buffalo. My personal and family story is a fairly common Alberta story. Both of my parents were born and raised on the farm in the Red Deer area. They met in Innisfail, and they married in Red Deer, and then they moved to Calgary to raise a family here. So my personal story, I was born in the Holy Cross. I grew up in Brentwood in what is now Calgary Varsity. I attended the University of Calgary and have lived in Beltline with my wife now for about 15 years. So I live 1.5 kilometers from the location where I was born. And I've lived and worked in Buffalo for about 15 years, working downtown in Inglewood and Ramsey and elsewhere. And the biggest change I think I've seen is the one that we've talked about a couple of times here already today, which is population growth, and disproportionately urban population growth. I think the second map from the end here that's been prepared with the population overlays is a great demonstration of that. and how much more quickly some urban ridings have been growing or constituencies have been growing. So understanding, the foregoing and not having understood previously the technical definition of effective representation, I think it would probably generally be the expectation of Albertan electors and voters that, generally speaking, that their voice have similar weight to other Albertans. I think that is probably the expectation most electors or voters would have. So with the population growing and growing disproportionately in urban ridings, I give an example where my parents, growing up in Innisfail, Sylvan Lake, so very familiar territory for some, and now living in Calgary Varsity. Calgary Varsity has seen population growth that is about 30% quicker, 30% greater than in Innisfail, Sylvan Lake. And if you were to check out the second map on the right, you would see 5 or 6 riding where the population has actually marginally decreased since the last count on the map there. And this is not just my immediate family. Across the 7 siblings between my mom and dad's families, 5 of the 7 have moved to urban ridings over their life, whether in Calgary or Red or elsewhere. So again, notwithstanding the definition of effective representation, I think most Albertans have the expectation that their vote would have a similar weight, and also that they see themselves in their community, so that they feel they're effectively represented when they feel that the ridings are drawn in such a way that they're in like communities. I think, as was previously stated, urban and rural voters, urban and rural communities see themselves differently. They see themselves having a different identity and different interests. And so keeping in mind not only that the urban ridings have grown more quickly than the rural ridings, but also that they will continue to grow more quickly, and that the decisions or the recommendations that are made in the report of this commission will stand for 8 or 10 years following this, that be taken into account. I would go a little bit further than the previous speaker to say that if it is the case that the average number of voters in each of these ridings is going to increase that much, that just adding a riding to each of Calgary and Edmonton would not feel fundamentally fair to most Albertans. I think I would go further to say that urban riding should be better represented or have fewer electorates per riding as a general principle, and as well as the previous speaker say that municipal boundaries ought to be respected. And to already answer one of the previous questions, no, I don't expect that will affect Calgary-Buffalo in any substantive way. But there has been massive population increases in the riding I live in. So thank you all for being here. I do appreciate your time and appreciate your preparation for this.
Well, thank you. I think, unless I'm misremembering, you're the first person that's here on behalf of Calgary-Buffalo.
Okay.
Sure.
So, Greg, any questions?
I do have questions, yeah, and I think you flagged it bang on. A lot of the growth in other parts of the world, maybe, or other large urban centers, the center hollows out, and perhaps people have a bit of a flight to the suburbs. Not the opposite. There is a significant growth around the edges of Calgary, but there's also growth, substantial growth, as you point out, in Calgary-Buffalo, and that presents a real conundrum for us because right now the math doesn't work. We are well over the 25% threshold in Buffalo, and every time I drive through downtown Calgary, there seems to be another big hole in the ground, which is going to be 30 more stories of residential and office conversions and all of that. I imagine probably resonates and lands with your experience as well. So given that, if we need to break this up, we do need to reduce the size and the population. Do you have any opinion or perspective on what belongs with what and what decisions we may want to be making on that?
And feel free to grab the mic and go to the map if you want to show us.
Sure, I think I can speak.
Okay.
But you're saying with respect to Calgary-Buffalo?
Buffalo specifically, yeah. What would you, if you were sitting on this side of the table and you had to make that choice, what would you try to keep together, and where would you maybe carve off? Yeah,
I mean, generally speaking, the Bow River provides a very natural barrier, one that's understandable to people. I wouldn't have said 10 or 15 years ago that I felt a kinship with Ramsey and Inglewood in the way I do now. I would say actually, as a member of the Beltline, it feels very contiguous, you know, culturally, population density-wise. I would say if you had to decrease the size of the riding due to the density, it might be south of 17th Avenue. So the section in Cliff Bungalow and what's the other community name?
Mission.
And Mission.
Use 17th as the border?
Yeah, as the south border over to effectively where McLeod is just north of the Elbow River. I think the rest of the riding, I would have to see what that for the numbers, right? But I think generally speaking.
Thank you.
No, as my colleague alluded to, we have been talking a lot about Calgary Buffalo because of the size. And, you know, this is for the most part, the most urban riding in the city. And so I think we do have to do something with it. But quite a lot of the usual rules don't seem to apply because it's not a land of bungalow neighborhoods, is it? And so it's rather hard to decide where the residential growth is coming. Crudely put, we need to reassign 20,000 people.
Yeah, and I would say the single family that does exist is in that area avenue.
Yeah, that's a very good point. But what about Inglewood and Ramsey and whatnot?
Yeah, there is some single family there as well. I would just say I've seen increasing densification. I would say right down almost to the edge of the riding is drawn here. There has been where the 17th Avenue East flyover is into International Avenue. There is large multi-unit buildings that have been placed there as well. So it's a possibility, but it feels more contiguous to my mind.
Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. I just more or less like to make a comment is that we are tasked to do the redraw with only 2 extra boundaries. And so when it became really apparent when we look at Calgary and a riding like Buffalo, that once the changes are made to get Buffalo into closer to the mean with room for growth, it's going to affect everything around it. So don't be overly surprised that a riding that you've come to be near and dear to is not going to look like that.
I think I'm close enough to the center that I'll be in and out.
Yes, it will be fine.
It may no longer actually look like a buffalo.
Yep, there.
Yes, good point. I didn't see that.
Mr. Evans?
Yeah, I've got a question for you in terms of kind of along the lines of what Greg asked you about where you would make a new boundary, you know, east to west. And as I look at the map, I'm wondering what happens on 11th Street Southeast if the boundary is there.
I know. Oh, I see. So it's 11th there. I think it's 12th further north.
Okay. I'm just thinking, I'm wondering if you could identify for me as well, in terms of looking at this, where this substantial growth is coming in this particular electoral district, because I want to settle my mind as to whether or not we have a situation where we've had a bunch of growth, but we're satiated now. We're not going to have a bunch of growth, or we're going to have less growth. And so, and if that's the case, then I think the solution is much easier than it could be. And so if you could tell me where you are identifying most of the growth to be coming from, and if it's on one side or the other, I think there might be a solution.
I would say I've not seen a lot of new buildings, again, south of 17th Avenue in the Mission area. There are some. In Inglewood, as you leave eastbound on 9th Avenue, there was some fairly strong community opposition, but there are now 3 and 4 and 5-story buildings there in places where there weren't previously. I still think there's a lot of room for growth in Inglewood in particular.
What's your opinion on, or what could you tell me about the conversion of commercial space downtown into residential space? Is that something that's going to increase? Any sense of that?
My understanding is that people intend for that to be the case, but it's proving significantly costly, and that the idea that a building that sits empty as a business, right, in commercial space can be easily converted to residential is not proving out, and that all of those projects are in cost overrun. I think it is a good idea in principle. I don't think the growth is going to be there in the way that people had hoped it might. Because when you're looking at 30%, the highest reported numbers, and it may well have been higher than that at a certain point for commercial real estate vacancies.
Right.
It's a very attractive idea. And I do think the downtown needs revitalization, but I'm not sure the same pace people would hope.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your answers.
Mr. Hargreaves, for interest, I'm going to read the last paragraph of the 2017 Electoral Boundary Report on Calgary Buffalo. Quote, the level of positive variance in the population created is justified in view of the majority by the likelihood that population growth will fall below provincial average, given the character of this central area. As a result, it is expected that population levels will likely be at or below provincial average population by the time the next Electoral Boundary Commission review.
Without understanding all the thought that went into that, it would be, I think, fair to say that there are some who support densification and some who do not. I would say the facts of the matter are that Calgary Buffalo's population has increased and will continue.
Oh yeah, no question. I don't
at the same rate, but yeah,
I don't cite this as a criticism of the previous commission either, but the
historical note.
The best laid plans of mice and men go after lay.
For sure.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for coming and presenting and for your thoughtful comment.
Thank you.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Marcia Cormier. Good evening.
So, thank you for this opportunity. I thought I heard about it, and I thought it was important, for as much participation as possible, given that you're providing the opportunity. So I'm another resident of Calgary, Glenmore. Jane did not call me. I'm here on my own.
Plausible deniability.
Yeah. I'm kind of pleased to hear that there's been a lot of people representing our communities. I think it's reflective of the community, and the enthusiasm and that we have around, all of the communities that are currently in the riding. So I won't. There's been obviously you've gotten a lot of details about the area and the neighborhoods. So I won't be too long. I've lived in Calgary Glenmore for almost 20 years now. I've been in Calgary for almost 35 years. So I'm a retired now healthcare worker. I think that obviously we have stayed in the area for 20 years because of the area. So I feel pretty enthusiastic about the area, and I think that is, again, why you maybe had people from the neighborhoods. I think that there is a lot of diversity in the neighborhoods that make up currently Calgary Glenmore, like some economic diversity. I think, but the things we have in common are probably more important than, some of the diversity. I think there's diversity probably in all ridings, and that adds to it. But I think that, really we have more things in common, right, than we have differences. Particularly, I think the geographic area in terms of the southwestern, around Glenmore Reservoir, all of the, natural spaces, the reservoir, Fish Creek, the Weasel Head. I think people are pretty devoted and enthused about those natural areas. For sure we are. And so that gives us common kind of purpose, common goals, common problems sometimes. And I think that, so I am quite, I feel quite strongly that I would like the boundaries, the boundaries make sense right now. For me, I would like them to stay similar, at least, if not the same, because I think we have similar needs and similar concerns. I think all communities have unique needs, and that all communities need MLAs that will represent those needs effectively. I think it would make it harder for the MLAs as well as the residents if there was too much, potentially mixed, like a rural or bedroom community mixed with urban. Like our communities are pretty, mix of business people, nature lovers. There, as Jane mentioned, a lot of seniors. But what we've noticed is also a lot of influx of younger families, particularly when we moved in 20 years ago. It was quite senior in our particular neighborhood anyway, and now it's shifting quite dramatically. A lot of young families. In conversations, I guess, with people in communities that I've had, I think most of them share my opinion anyway, that either adding or subtracting too much to what we currently have, particularly if anything went outside of city limits, people would be probably not too happy about that. I think that would be detrimental in many ways. We have common concerns about traffic flow and services and, keeping our recreation and all those natural spaces as much as possible. And I think, I think in any area it would make the job of an MLA more challenging to represent really diverse needs and concerns. So, given that you've heard obviously a lot about that area, the other concern that probably people have expressed, I heard Jane express a little bit, is that I think it's important that Alberta, everywhere, Calgary, rural, urban, whatever, have confidence in a fair and democratic election process. We have such shaky times right now in terms of confidence in politics and government processes, and I hope that we can, strive to not add to those, make them worse, and even perception of unfairness or gerrymandering kinds of things can be, just make things even, worse in lots of ways. We all, I think, expect a fair and democratic process, but perceptions are, are important. So, I hope that in terms of my writing, that it sort of is kept more or less intact. I can't really speak to, I mean, I've worked downtown, I've worked in different areas of the city, obviously been in different areas of the city, but I'm just really speaking to my district, because that's where I'm most familiar and passionate about. So thank you again for your time and listening and this process.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Evans, any questions or comments?
No questions. Thank you.
No questions, but thank you for your time tonight. I appreciate it.
I want to come back to your remark about young families moving in, which is always a good thing, because I'd like to think that is a positive sign for growth, population growth, filling the schools out, so on. So is it your experience that the schools are stable in their populations?
Well, my children, well, I didn't say both of them, but one of them did go to both elementary and high schools in the area, but he's older now. So I have no recent experience with the schools, but I haven't heard they aren't. I can't really speak a lot to how stable, overcrowded, undercrowded, or whatever.
Because you are seeing young families move in.
Yeah.
I'm very pleased to hear it because, as I say, you're slightly under, but I don't feel motivated to do too much about it because it may look after itself.
Yeah. I mean, it does seem like there's a shift, at least in the particular area right around me. Like it seems quite dramatic. When we moved in, there was not a little kid running around the street. We're fairly close to a dark dog park and the Weasel Head, so there's always, bikers and joggers and whatever. But there were no kids on. Now there's kids running all over the place. So it is shifting for sure.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah, good. I don't know if I have any more questions I could possibly think of. Glenmore. So a Facebook group or I don't know, like a bat signal or something, but clearly you guys got yourself organized. So message heard loud and clear on Glenmore.
Okay.
So let me because we have some time. We heard gerrymander used twice this evening. Let me just pose a hypothetical for you and look at the west end of the because you said it would be very, very detrimental. Look, very detrimental if outside areas were brought in.
I mean, outside city limits.
Right. So let's look at the west boundary.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think this is the case based on my knowledge of that part of the city. But let's assume there's a few clusters of acreages there, and we needed a couple of thousand people just to bring your numbers up.
Yeah.
How damaging would that be if we brought them into Calgary Glenmore? You talk about traffic patterns, you talk about, and that's an area of growth. I mean, that's a big concern. It's going to be a big concern if there were businesses out there. Why would that be so detrimental?
Well, I think there are, just vastly different issues and problems or concerns that those kinds of areas would not share with kind of the urban areas. Like we have all these natural spaces, but we're also quite urban, and we're not downtown, but we're like, in terms of the geographic size of the whole of Calgary, we're pretty urban. And I know that, and I have lived, I lived in Okotoks for a while, for example, so I have, some experience with kind of outside city limits and some of the more rural acreage kinds of places. I just think the concerns are quite different. You know, so for both those kinds of populations, I think it would be detrimental.
Board governance, diversity is key to success. So a little bit of diversity may not be that damaging if you had a few.
Yeah, I mean, we have a little bit of diversity within what we have currently.
Right, but if we needed the numbers, there'd be no big problem with that, would there be?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know for sure, but I would be concerned about it. I would be concerned also about the perception of why that was happening.
Numbers. As I said, numbers. Because like, if we had to get you up and there were 2,000 people there, that would be probably, because they can't go anywhere else.
Well, but so where would they be currently? I don't know. Like, where are they currently?
I know. Well, I realize it's hypothetical, but in order to give you numbers right next door, right across the line, I guess I'm just asking, how damaging would that be to Calgary Glenmore?
I don't know how damaging it would be. I'm just concerned that people with sort of similar issues, similar shared geography, similar, you know, issues around services and transportation, and, you know, we've had, you know, some issues in the neighborhood with development and stuff. I would be concerned that there are different concerns on both sides.
No question.
That would make it difficult, not just for the residents, but for whoever ends up representing and trying to. Because even though they may be close in miles, they may be quite different in terms of needs and concerns.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Any other? Did I miss someone? Any other? Your excuse, ma'am. You can return. Anybody else here to present that I haven't called on? Yes, sir. Well, if you want to present, come forward. We won't charge you extra at all.
But we will charge you. Diamond Valley.
I'm a learner in this process, a lifelong learner as an educator. My name is Mike Hornballa. Recently, I feel like they retired, but I want to say rewired administrator.
Could you spell your last name, please? Horembeala. Mike is fine, or Mr. H.
I've been in Alberta. I came to University of Alberta in 1987 from Vancouver. I was at UBC and transferred to the Faculty of Education, and I never left. I still kind of weird consider my home in Vancouver, but I've been here teaching in Rocky Mountain House area for 22 plus years. And I've been a teacher, vice principal, and administrator in that area. I've been up into Thurber and Red Deer, and in 2014, I came down and became vice principal at Highwood High School. And recently, just at the beginning of the pandemic, was transferred to oil fields, about a block and a half from my house. And I've been there since. And my wife and I have taken big roots. She's from Calgary. She was hoping to make it tonight, but wasn't feeling well. And so so my riding, I guess, it was Highwood, of course, and it wasn't really specific. I knew you guys weren't coming down to Diamond Valley to see us. But I just kind of, it's been very eye-opening for me, just kind of understanding the process has grown quite a bit. But even hearing now, from especially this area here and some of the concerns I've heard in our area as well, we're not sure if there were to be realignment, how our riding would end possibly going. Would it be a little east? Would it be a little west, snaking around the edge of the mountains?
We want to hear from you then. Let's wait till, okay, the map is up now, Mr. Highwood.
Yeah. And so I've heard all kinds of different things in the coffee shop, about where it might be going. But one of the elements is, speaking about a lot of my personal values, having been grown up in an urban environment, sometimes I'll speak a little closer to what Calgary values. A lot of more urban people would. We call our place even like we're planted. I don't know if you've heard this, but it's new to me, Reuben.
Yes.
Yes, we're that sort of in between, and I know that where I am in Diamond Valley, that again a lot of the Valley is still a strong agricultural based community, and our students at Highwood, I've subbed there probably 70% of the school year. My phone is vibrating right now because they're short guest teachers and needing to keep coming back in. But I know the values definitely are very different. That would be, and it's interesting when you brought up there the idea of how impactful would it be if that some acreages, but that I call them sort of state acreages that are out in that area, with extending out from the Bruce Meadows or along through those edges through there, how that would be. And I know. But I'm sort of coming more in perspective of the values where we are, I think would be very different. I would feel odd voting in an election if that went that far. I don't know if that is even a consideration. The further you get further sort of south and west from that area and from Calgary Glenmore type riding, it would be very different for us. And I think that our alignment from values, I know diversity, I know what you're saying too, because my whole life of teaching diversity and explaining we need that to have a quality environment and community and as citizens. But there's also just a very big divide in how people look at things. And I'm just wondering, can I ask a question? Is that all right? And forgive me if part of my learning process here, but so with the considerations, for example, that have gone on with Calgary and moving perhaps parts and pieces, is it a common practice to pull urban or through rural into more urban environments, like in this process?
Is it a common practice?
Yeah.
Good question. We haven't done anything yet in terms of this commission. And the last commission, I'm not sure. No, in fact, the last commission, I don't think.
Because people were curious in our community, just wanting to know if that is a consideration, whether it's new or ongoing or so on. And again, that term that I heard brought up twice previously, just wondering about how to influence, wanting to make sure that it's a clean, democratic process that the value, has been quite a bit different. And the further, I would say, almost like a bullseye, the further you move away from the center, then the values are changing quite considerably. In how people want to see the government formed, that process. There's that. Because even though Diamond Valley too, just from a demographic perspective, in the last couple of years, even I've noticed it, we don't have a ski hill, so we do not grow at the rate that Canmore does. We did, I think we would have grown more, but we are finding that it's becoming more of a bedroom community, and more people are buying up places. Homes are getting not just the below asking price; they're now starting to get above asking price, and a part of that was the ring road being completed. So our demographic is for sure changing in that way. I know there's a professor at Mount Royal who drives from south of us, and I work quite a bit at the University of Calgary in the outdoor center, so I'm coming here quite often to work. And the ring road's been a big piece in that. So there is definitely a demographic change, but at this point, it's been slow in my observation of it. And I think it'll be a while before, like I say, the values within that community of Calgary will closer. They'll never be exactly the same, and we don't want them to be. Anyway, I think that's all I kind of wanted to say and share, but I appreciate you taking my question and helping me with my learning journey here. Part of being retired too, when I've immersed myself so far in my job and coaching and sports, I'm finally becoming a citizen again and getting involved in other areas and volunteering. So thank you very much for the time. I appreciate it.
But I asked, how did people adjust to Diamond Valley?
It was interesting. Well, we had to actually move our mail addresses back to Black Diamond because mail wasn't coming through to us because we weren't recognizing it.
Oh.
And I, like the mayor, I worked with his wife and I've taught his kids. And it was sort of it was one of those things because somebody in Diamond Valley would say Turner Valley. And on this side there, and so I think the dust has finally settled. There's still a few municipal things of departments that are working way out, but it has finally become a thing, and I can say it now almost without thinking.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Evans. Any questions or comments?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. The one thing that had come up in previous presentations is that Millerville, which is sitting in that little dip, is sitting in the Banff-Kananaskis riding. And in discussions, I think that's something we're going to look at because it appears from the presentations it's better suited into the ranching country that's represented by your riding. And so but that's not a big population base or anything, but that was one thing that we've certainly made note of. And, you know, the other thing too that we haven't asked much today because they've been mostly Calgary people is about the name of your riding, because we've also been tasked to change riding names if appropriate to do so, or for whatever reason, and you being Highwood, what do you think of that?
That's actually a very good question. I taught in High River, and, you know, for me, that was sort of the base of that area. As a school district, that's where the offices are. Provincial offices are in High River as well. You can't overlook the famous show as well in there. But definitely a different representation there. I would see, and it's on the far edge of, you know, like Highwood it's not part of geographically.
Yeah.
And the pass and everything else. So I think it would be something that would be possibly considered.
Yeah. Sometimes they pick the largest center, like, you know, you could be called Okotoks - something. Not because Okotoks is not a standalone piece, but if you came up with something, let us know.
Honestly, the two most central pieces of the document are obviously the population, and Okotoks is geographically centered, but Okotoks sheep. There's a Sheep River. You can see comes through the heart of Diamond Valley, through the heart of Okotoks, and then just catches the Highwood off there. So I mean, along that sheep or along there, that's the middle of our part of our veins goes through there. Although it's looking right now more like Okotoks Creek. Sheep Creek.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was the blueberry plant. Isn't there a blueberry farm?
Oh, I'm not sure. Not
across Smoke Road?
They've got a number, and there's the Saskatoon. Saskatoon. Yeah, which are prevalent. The dog park is all through those areas. Everybody starting to get excited about the.
Okotoks, Saskatoon would be helpful then.
No problem. Everybody in this district eats them.
Okay. Julian, any questions?
Well, no, not really. I've heard it said, but I don't think it can be the case. So I'm going to ask you, what about the connectivity between Okotoks and High River? Did you ever conceive of them being in the same riding?
From Okotoks is central because from like this, for example, the school district perspective, I've taught now in most of the schools in the district, and Okotoks, probably the number one bedroom community for Foothill School Division is Okotoks. Okay. And the run between those two are it's nonstop. We have a lot of South Calgary people coming out to work, but not anywhere near. Like I was surprised when I found out how many of our staff are from Okotoks. Very few live locally in our area. It's just they go out in all directions and to all the schools throughout the district. So it is a bit more, but I would see that would be an extension potentially of that rival.
I'm not suggesting that I'm in favor of it, but whenever we see two towns in plausible adjacency, we just need to ask if you're friendly.
Yeah. Well, as far as I know, there's no spitting when they're mentioned.
Right?
Yeah, I think Susan asked my question about Millerville. It's always interesting just to know what the kind of trading area is. And I guess, you talked earlier about, building on Ms. Cormier's sort of comments on sort of like with like. And I guess, the part I reflect on is not so much that we want everyone in a constituency to be homogenous and total thing. But I think what we want to try to avoid, and maybe I'm trying to phrase this as a question as opposed to a statement. I guess if there was a scenario, and I can't think of a logical or reasonable one around Diamond Valley, but where you, just to make up the numbers, have a relatively small group of people who really don't necessarily fit. So they are perhaps rural or urban, whereas the dominant group would be city. And then you've got 55,000 people in city neighborhoods, and then you've got 5,000 people in a rural area. I guess if I were to put that to you and you were one of those people in the rural area where the scenario presented, how would you feel about that?
It would be different. Like, I mean, for example, like, you know, the challenge that's been brought up around MLA properly representing somebody from outside of us, because where our, like, for example, our school district goes, Millerville obviously is within our catchment area, but I was shocked to find out when I was driving to Bragg Creek one day for through Beach Out West, seeing school buses that were almost in Bragg Creek that had Foothill School Division on them, and that area and the demographic, I think it would be very challenging for them to have people represent such broad views and I mean, Glenmore's a long-established community, a lot of tradition in it, but there's a lot longer, different ranching community. Like our kids, it still shocks me how many kids wear roper boots and sit there. They're playing football in shorts and t-shirts and roper boots. And you would never find that sort of representation. And I mean, I'm giving a little bit, but at the same time, that's also the demographic population out there. It's got a very strong Western flavor. The Millerville Farmers Market, everything out there is very different.
Great, thank you. I think you had to go with Diamond Valley because Turner Black sounded too much like a country singer.
It did. It very much did.
Well, thank you
very much. That was great.
For being dragged up here.
I actually, it's part of my commitment moving forward to my semi-rewirement there. I just want to get a bit more involved in it. So when I have questions that is sitting in my house, I want to come out and ask them.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah. Sir, do you want to present? Well, come forward. Again, we won't charge you extra for not registering. Nicole. Please identify yourself and tell us which riding you live in.
Dr. Jeremy Hexum, and I live in Calgary Varsity. And I just wanted to make I've been listening to these presentations all day, and so I'm going to bring up a bit of a different perspective on things, I hope.
Good.
I live in Silver Springs. I've been in Silver Springs since 2005. When I moved into Silver Springs, I was part of Calgary Bow. In 2008, I was actually the elections clerk for Calgary Bow, so I know the riding very well. Very large riding. Very glad it was slowed down. It took me about 45 minutes to drive it to the different polling stations. In 2011, we became part of Calgary Hawkwood. In 2015, I was the returning officer for Calgary Hawkwood. In 2019, we became Calgary Varsity. So in the years I've lived there, I've been part of 3 different riding associations or ridings for it. We get moved around a lot. In fact, in 2019, I had no idea that Calgary Hawkwood had been eliminated and we were part of Calgary Varsity. So what I would ask is for certain communities like mine, can we have some stability? Can we have one riding permanently that doesn't move around constantly so that people actually know where we are? Because nobody knows who our MLAs are or where we are. And, you know, Silver Springs was, in fact, named best community in Calgary with the CBC poll not a couple of years ago. So I would think we should just call it new riding of Silver Springs, or even if we have to, bring back Calgary Hawkwood.
That's fascinating. I'm looking at just at the map right here, and Nose Hill Drive and Crouch Out Trail is 4 constituencies on that. So I can completely understand how previous folks who sat around the table like we did would look at major roads and go, my colleague Dr. Martin likes to say, we all would nip and tuck a little bit of this here and there. So I'm glad you mentioned that to us, because it should have come down to it. That's actually a very relevant consideration. If you have bounced around a bunch and we can avoid it we certainly will endeavor to do so. So that's very helpful. Thank you.
Well, just my perennial question really is that do you anticipate significant new residential growth?
No, I do not. Not for Silver Springs because there's just nothing going on. I mean, the biggest thing we had to happen recently was a Habitat for Humanity complex went in, but there's nowhere really you can do massive growth in Silver Springs. Now, other areas may be, but not Silver Springs per se.
But in the whole of Calgary parcel?
I don't know.
Okay.
I'm thinking more of my own community.
Well, that's
I'm being very selfish here.
Excellent point on boundaries, because that's where you got moved all over the place. And the Act clearly says to us that one of our tasks is to consider clear and understandable boundaries and keep the chaos to a minimum. So I appreciate you hammering that point home. Thank you.
Mr. Evans, any comment?
Yeah, I'm interested in, you seem very attuned to your community and tuned out to the rest of varsity. So why I want to, that's important to me because I don't think you're alone. And so that wasn't a negative comment, that was an observation. I don't think you're alone. I want to know why you're so in tune to Silver Spring, but perhaps more importantly, what other communities surrounding Silver Springs you're more in tune with and why than you are with the balance of varsity. Does that make sense? I want to know connectivity.
I think in one perspective, I don't do anything, I do very little in Calgary varsity or any of the other communities. I mean, other than doing my PhD in 2010 to 2017, I didn't really go anywhere in that area other than the University of Calgary. I do my shopping at the Crawford Shopping Center, which is just above, so if you look at Coachella Trail, it's just on the, up and to the left. My parents live in Hawkwood. So, you know, when we were Calgary Hawkwood, I thought we were much closer connected going up with what we did. Calgary Hawkwood was Silver Springs, Ranchland, Hawkwood, Arbor Lake, Citadel.
So you move north?
Yeah.
North and east. Yeah. Sorry, north and west is where you...
That's where Calgary Hawkwood was.
If I was stalking you, that's where I would hang out.
Yeah, and downtown.
And downtown.
Downtown.
Well, that makes it complicated.
Yeah, I know. But that's basically the area that we were in. And, you know, varsity, you know, I don't think I don't think I've been down to 18th Street Northwest at the far end of the riding ever. Maybe I have, but I mean, I don't go down that far. I'm not connected to that part of it. Whereas I'm more connected to the Hawkwood, the Ranchland, the Crowfoot Shopping Center, Arbor Lake. That sort
part of any community associations?
No, I'm not.
And do you know other people in your community that are like-minded like you that go sort of gravitate to the same parts of the city? Or are you a lone wolf?
I'm a lone wolf. I'm unique in my own. I think. I mean, I don't really think we do. I mean, I have a lot of neighbors who go down to Bowness because Bowness is where they have the library. They have a good library down there. They have an art school. They have an art supply place. So I think people do that area for Bowness for some of the activities. But I don't know if my neighbors go elsewhere. I stand alone, and I'm quite unique when it comes to my neighbors.
Is it easy to get to Bowness from?
Not as easy, but to go down to Bowness Park, you just go down Nose Hill and Nose Hill. Then, yeah, I mean, it's quite easy. It's just one street to go down, and we're sort of, it's out of the way, but we're there, so it's not that hard. And Baker Park, which is there, you have to go through down Nose Hill. And I think to Nose Hill goes straight to across Sarcee, and then I think it's 85th Street that gets you into Bowness. So it's easier to get into Bowness than other areas. But I mean, Bowness again is a unique area unto itself. And should it be part of Bow? I don't know. I would put Bowness, Montgomery, Westmount, all that area together if it was me. But I just know Silver Springs and what we are.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate those answers.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Hexum. You did kind of portray it as a bit of a negative, going back and forth. It could be considered as a positive. Everybody wants Silver Springs. Everybody wants
Community of the Year.
Fisheries. So,
Yeah.
No, I agree with you on that perspective, but I mean, when you've moved around a lot and people sort of get confused about voting, I mean, I remember with Calgary Bow in 2008, part of Calgary Bow is part of Silver Springs. So there's a little part of it that was part of Calgary Varsity. And the amount of phone calls that we took with people who went to the one school to vote and weren't allowed to vote, and were calling the media outlets saying I wasn't allowed to vote at this school because it was part of Calgary Varsity, not Calgary Bow, was a headache I still remember. So from that perspective, yes, but from another, it'd nice to have some consistency. Let's keep one riding so we're not bouncing like a ball all over the place.
well, that little corner problem has I think, turned the lights on for the commission to cognizant of. So thank you very much. I think I've pretty well cornered everybody in the room to make the presentation. What about? Yeah, you're from Edmonton, I know. But,